As the weekend rolls in, many of us eagerly anticipate stepping back from work to relax, explore hobbies, or hang out with friends. But have you ever stopped to consider how these 48 hours of free time came to be seen as every worker's right? We can thank labor unions for our weekends. These group of workers come together to act as a single entity with the goal of representing the rights and interests of many rather than individuals alone. Over 60 unions represent nearly 14 million workers in the US today, particularly transportation employees like the Teamsters, government workers, and laborers like electricians, plumbers, and more. So today we're going to explore labor unions, breaking down the way they work, their history, and their impact on business and work life. To understand labor unions, we need to travel back to the 18th century, right when the Industrial Revolution was kicking off in Europe. Factories were sprouting up, and with them a new wave of labor, managed labor. The first American labor union emerged in 1794 when cobblers in Philadelphia formed the Federal Society of Journeymen Cordwainers to protect their wages from those agreeing to work for lower pay. But you see, the owners of the companies weren't happy their workers were grouping together to demand fairer wages. So what did they do? They took the workers to court. You might be thinking, they can't do that, right? Surely the workers have the right to organize. And in today's world, you'd be right, but in 1794, labor laws weren't as much of a thing. So in 1806, when master shoemakers sued the union, the court sided with the owners, marking the union members as conspirators. The result? The union went bankrupt, and for decades, unions were treated as a criminal conspiracy. That is until 1842, when the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court found it was not illegal for workers to organize and pursue their interests. Labor unions didn't really pick up steam until 1935 during the Great Depression, when the tide started to turn. Under President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the National Labor Relations Act was passed, finally giving workers the right to form unions and strike. This was a game changer and led to a surge in unions. By 1983, roughly 20% of U.S. wage and salary workers were union members. But as of 2023, that number has lowered to 10%. As we move along in history to the present day, we see labor unions and the way they work evolve. So how exactly does a labor union work? It all starts when workers recognize some form of unfair working conditions, whether a lack of safety protocols or low pay. This is when leaders among workers campaign among other workers to unionize. They reach out to a union organizer and the process begins, quietly at first. That union could be specific to their corporation, such as Starbucks Workers United, or their industry at large, such as the United Auto Workers. Workers sign union cards, typically anonymously, to signal their desire to bargain collectively rather than individually. If enough cards are signed, they approach their employer with a simple request: recognize the union. But here's the thing, the company might refuse to acknowledge the union. At that point, the employees can take it to the National Labor Relations Board, or NLRB, triggering an election. During the election, the NLRB counts ballots and reports the results. This typically happens in person at the workplace, with the NLRB representatives present. Once the union is recognized either voluntarily or by winning support from a majority of workers via election, workers start the collective bargaining process to negotiate with the employer about what they want, think better pay or benefits. Then a contract is drawn up to enforce those decisions. Nevertheless, there are trade-offs with labor unions. Critics argue that unions make it harder to manage low-performing workers and drive up labor costs, with union workers estimated to cost companies about 10 to 15% more than non-union employees. Some even say unions create a divide between workers and management, mainly because the National Labor Relations Act prevents managers and supervisors from joining unions themselves. But on the flip side, supporters believe unions are essential for securing better pay, benefits, and a structured way to address worker complaints. Labor unions are more than just worker associations. They're a force that has shaped and continues to shape the everyday behavior and habits of the American workforce. If you learned something new in this video, consider giving us a thumbs up, and if you want to continue down your path for knowledge, subscribe to our channel.